Okay, hello, hello. Okay, hello, and welcome back to some more Space Engineers. Now, the Automatons beta has recently come out, and right behind me, as you can see, we are going to be demonstrating how two of the new blocks work, and not just how they work actually, a practical use for them I would like to demonstrate. As you can see behind here, this is the result of these two blocks working together. Now that is a little transport ship or little cargo vessel that I've rigged up to transport ores and material from this little mining rig all the way back to this base. Now, how this works, first of all, I'm going to show you a little bit of a walkthrough, or rather, a little bit of a demonstration what this thing does. So let me explain. You have a ship here with one of those, or at least one of these blocks. You only need one, by the way, to fly to this mining rig here, and whatever was inside of this cargo container gets filtered and delivered into the container of this thing. Now, as to sort of the condition that allows this thing to detect whether it's full or whether it's not, we will settle that on a separate video discussing the event controller. For now, I want to focus on these two and how you will be able to set up an automatic transport ship. Now, obviously, there are plenty of other examples of practical uses that you can do for this, but this one, I would like to demonstrate this one because this one is pretty simple and pretty easy to understand the concept of. Plus, it's the one that you have seen demonstrated in one of the trailers for the Automatons beta, and it shows a little mining rover with a small ship that delivers its cargo to a stationary container. So, once this thing has taken the load, let's say the cargo, the ores, what have you, and delivered this to the other station, it's taking a bit slowly, taking its precious time here, but oh well. Once it delivers it down here, it lands onto the connector and hold on, wait for it. Oh, come on. There. Lands onto the connector, locks it in, and turns off all the atmospheric thrusters. Now, how was I able to do that? Well, first, let me discuss what these things do in the first place. Now, this is the AI light controller. This is going to be the bread and butter. I'm sorry, what? This is going to be the bread and butter of any sort of drone that you would like to use with these things. Either these ones or this thing, the task module. And this is the flight module, the one that you need. These AI defensive modules, the offense modules, and the basic task modules. Every single one of those is going to require at least one of these blocks onto any ship or station. Well, not station, rather. Any ship, large grid or small grid, that you would like to use with the new AI controllers. So, let's just... hold on, let me just put on a control panel here, so we can get down to the stuff that it do. So, control panel there. See, let's go with AI, and here it is, the AI flight control. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's showing up here little errors that you can see. It says error, no movement input, error, no error, grid cannot rotate because, well, it's a station and it has a gyroscope, and grid cannot move in one or more directions. Please ensure a thruster is available for each direction. So at least here the block straight up tells you what you are lacking inside your ship for this to function. So for the first one, let me explain. Like I said, this thing is required by all those other blocks, and in turn this thing will pretty much be entirely useless without any instruction from an AI control module like the task recorder or the basic task or the offensive modules, etc, etc. Now the second one, obviously it needs the ship to be mobile or movable. Same with the third thing, you need a gyroscope and a thruster for that thing to be able to get around. Now ideally, when you design one of these drones, one thing I've found is that it's not particularly, let's say, discerning of the direction that it's flying in. So when you design one of these drones, I would suggest that you put an equal amount of thrusters facing in, well, just about every direction. Yeah? You want to design this thing to be as omnidirectional as you can make it, so that regardless of whether it's pointing backwards, like you would see here, it's going to fly backwards into the rig like that. It's going to have enough thrust to do it within, well, let's say a reasonable amount of time. Otherwise, oh, actually it turned around. Well, it's flying sideways, but still, you get the point. Oh, you still need a decent amount of thrust going in every direction that you need it to go for it to be able to move properly. Now, aside from that, let's go and move on to what all of these things are supposed to do. So most of these are pretty self-explanatory. Now, this thing kind of works like the remote control module in that it has its own autopilot, but again, it won't activate unless it receives instructions from one of these things. Yeah? So let's say that it does. It has received instructions or a waypoint. Next thing you need to know is that the collision avoidance generally, because the other remote control blocks can be, let's say, pretty complex. Well, it's complex and it's simple in some ways, but for the task recorder specifically, you want this thing to be turned off. Why? Because when you are docking, like this thing here, I think it's coming back. When you are docking onto a station or a ship like this, that little collision detection toggle is going to conflict a whole of a lot with the task recorder, in that thing is going to want to dock. Actually, maybe I can demonstrate this. This thing is going to want to dock, but since the flight controller has the collision avoidance on, it's going to detect that, well, there's a station over there and I don't want to collide with that. So you see here, immediately it's, well, let's just kind of speaks for itself. It's kind of all over the place. This is not its usual light path. That's because the task recorder and the collision detection is conflicting with each other, and it's going to cause a lot more problems than it should. See, it doesn't want to go down, and since the collision detection keeps getting set off, there, see that? Let's just turn that thing off or get into an accident. Where was I? There we go. Collision avoidance off. Okay. So, as for precision mode, again, if you are familiar with the remote control block, it's pretty much the same thing. that if it has a waypoint that it has to go go through, or find, the precision mode will allow it to sort of catch that waypoint precisely on top of it. I think that's how it works before it moves on to the next one. So next you have the speed limit, again self-explanatory, and then you have the align to P gravity. Now this is very useful, especially on any planet that you are on, because if it detects a planet, that's how the thing works. If it detects a planet with a gravitational field, it will immediately orient itself according to this horizontal line you see on the HUD, right? That's pretty much the indicator of what is the horizon level. So, moving on. This thing, minimum altitude, pretty much exactly what it says. Now you want to keep this thing relatively low, right? Because there are certain circumstances, like if you have to pathfind your way around a mountain or a hill or some sort, that's the point where you want the collision avoidance to turn on anyway. Now, for our purposes, moving from station to station, we might not want to set this thing too high in case it conflicts with the task recorder, right? So lastly, you have the max pitch angle and max roll angle. So this is only relevant, I say relevant, this is only, I think, useful for when you are on top of a planet, is that it prevents the AI controller or the task recorder or what have you to allow the vessel to tilt or roll further than, well, what the indicator says. So for my purposes, since all our connectors are pretty much oriented vertically anyway, you want to keep the vessel as level as you can throughout the entire course of this trip, so that you don't have any problems. Much more so that we have a connector that isn't protruding out, but it's sort of level with the surrounding blocks. Now this, I don't actually recommend doing this with your connectors, because, well, if you have a ship that has a few other blocks on top of it, it might cause you more problems down the line. So now that we've talked about the basic overview of the flight controller, we can move on to the task recorder and how exactly this guy is moving from rig to station and back and forth the way it does without any input from myself. So let's actually stop this thing by turning off the AI flight module, right? See, the way that thing works, let's find it. The AI recorder is that it does exactly what it says. It's a recorder of the actions that you take with your vessels, where you move, what blocks you turn on and off, and sort of which path that you take going from one point to the other. Now it can actually get quite complex, or I say quite complex. It's fairly straightforward in that it just records whatever flight path you're taking. If you're, let's say, going around all these columns, all these blocks, maneuvering between stuff, you can actually record that, and more or less the recording module will definitely, why do I keep saying module, by the way? It's a block, damn it. The recording block will more or less set you up that it follows the path that you take while you were recording pretty darn accurately. What did I say? Accurately. English, sorry. So let's actually test that. See, we have a whole bunch of waypoints here that I've recorded, setting up this thing to deliver ore from this drill to that station. So now what we can do is that delete all of that stuff and record a new flight plan for it. So let's just delete all waypoints, right? And by the way, you can set this thing to repeat so that if you finish sort of accomplishing the waypoints, it maintains the waypoints and doesn't delete it afterwards, so that you can do it again, right, after you finish sort of getting to the end of the flight plan. So what you do is that you just keep AI behavior off for now. You press repeat in case you want to be able to do the thing where it goes back and forth, and then you need to be able to, I'm sorry, where was that? Let me find it again. You need to be able to record your flight plan over here. Now there's some other options here that says record interval and minimal distance. So record interval, what it does is that it says the time, it sets the, let's say, time, or rather intervals, that it creates its own waypoint between one point to the other, right? So what I have mine set is 1.5, or rather 1.7 seconds, meaning that after it sets up a sorry, I can't English right now. After it sets up a waypoint right here, it will count for up to about 1.7 seconds, that if I move to another place, if 1.7 seconds has passed, will sort of set up another waypoint in the next position. Now, as for the other one, minimal distance, it works very much the same way. It says a waypoint is added when the distance to the last waypoint is greater than this value, and that's a very important thing to take note, and the time since the previous waypoint exceeds the waypoint addition interval value, meaning that it's not going to set up another waypoint if it's within the minimal distance of the last waypoint that it sets up, right? Does that make sense? So if you are sort of moving along recording, let's say, and it sets up a waypoint right here, if it moves at least 2.2 meters in any other direction and 1.7 seconds has passed, then and only then will it automatically set up another waypoint while you are recording. Now, aside from that, you have an add waypoint that you can use to manually add a waypoint that the flight plan will sort of, progress to while it's on its journey, right? And then there's the reference beacons that you can use. So if you have a beacon set up, it's going to use that beacon, in case you have a ship, it's going to use that beacon as a reference to all of the other waypoints that you made while recording your flight plan. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate that today because it sounds like Clang waiting to happen, to be honest. But this thing, I can see this being much more useful on a mobile vessel or a mothership than it will be on a station. Now, let's say you're moving from a static mining grid to a moving station, you might need 2 controller blocks, let's say, or rather 2 recorder blocks, one that has a beacon set to it and another that doesn't. Because I can imagine if one of the things is moving, or rather one of those ships are moving and the other is staying put, that's going to mess up all of the waypoints along the way. So we're not going to do that right now. So let's get down to it. Now, what I want to do, like I said, since I want this thing to sort of collect cargo, right? Collect cargo into here, and once that's full, I want this thing to be able to move out, move up like this, and turn. Hopefully it does. Hopefully it turns. Turn to the station, move forward like so, line itself up over the next connector that I want to set this thing down on, and then dump all its resources onto this connector, right? So let's actually start at the beginning. We want to record all the actions it will take, all the routes that it's going to go through to get to this point, and then go back, right? So let's start. Actually, let's turn off these two, because we're not going to be teaching those right now, and those are just going to get in the way. So now my flight controller is turned off, and the recording block is turned on and awaiting orders. Now doesn't have any AI, it's not running anything, it's just on right now. Now to record, you have to set up one of these actions to go and record, and once you press this, literally everything that you do with your taskbar, it's going to record, or at least everything that you do with the ship. I think with the sole exception of turning off and on the dampeners, because I've tested that and it doesn't record that action, so oh well. But basically just about everything else that you do with your ship, whether you turn a block on, whether you turn engines on or stockpiles on or whatever, there might be limits of course, but it pretty much catches everything that you do. So where I want to start with this now, generally the problem with this thing is that if you leave all these thruster blocks on and the AI is still running, it's going to still try to sort of line itself up with the last waypoint, which is going to be a problem if you are connected to a connector like this, and you're going to be wasting all of your battery. So before you start, you want all of your thruster blocks, right? Hydrogen thrusters, ion thrusters, atmospheres, whatever, you want that stuff to be turned off. Next thing you want to do is to unlock from the connector, and once you do that, you want to be launching up as quickly as possible, because as you know, if you are sort of lined up to a connector like this, the magnetic force between the connectors, even though they're not connected, is going to drag you back down and cause you problems again. Now, if you turn the connection on and turn it off and then lift off immediately, that magnetic connection is not going to be a problem. So you want to be able to launch immediately after you disconnect once you start recording. So let's get ready. We want to be locked, and we want our thrusters off. Yeah, and I'm going to press number 1 here. That's the recording. I'm going to press that, and once it turns on, everything I do is going to be recorded. Let's start. 3, 2, and record. Thrusters on, connector disconnected, lift off, and then we want to stop here. Turn the recording off. Now, why? Because once that recorder is turned off, unless you are planning to maneuver it all the way to a bunch of blocks around ships or bases or what have you, there's no point in this thing sort of writing up or generating all these waypoints while it travels from there to the base, especially considering if nothing is going to be in the way, like you're right out in the open right here. So let's go back. The last time we stopped recording was somewhere directly over this connector, right? So we stopped recording there. The next thing we want to go is to just fly this thing directly on top of the next connector that we want this thing to land on. And let's just line this up here. I want to dock this thing first so that it lines up perfectly. Right, let's dock it first. Okay, let's not crash this thing. Line it up. Okay, so that it's lined up there, and if we just go up, straight up from there, then we will be directly vertical from the connector. And from here, this is where we want to use the add waypoint function, right? Because the last time this thing was recording, our waypoint was all the way back there. Now we want this thing to fly straight to this point. Oh, and by the way, in case you might be wondering if there are any mountains on the way, what you can do is, because you can actually set up actions on certain waypoints, like for this last action, you can set this up to activate the collision avoidance on this thing, in case you want to, but we're not going to do that right now. And then once you set the waypoint on top of the connector, right? Let's set let's set the next waypoint here. Add waypoint, and there you have it. It adds the 6th waypoint, which is over the connector. Now at this point, you can also sort of deactivate the collision avoidance here, in case you are, you know, traveling this thing over a bunch of mountains and whatnot. And then from here, we want to go down a little bit so that the waypoint doesn't overlap, and then start recording again from this point, and then just do what we would naturally do, which is go down to the connector, lock onto the connector thing, and then turn off our thruster so that we conserve energy. So let's turn the connector on. Let's drop down, or rather turn the recorder on, drop down to this connector, line it up. There we go. Connect this, and then turn off the thrusters, and then stop the recording. So what does that result in? You now have a complete one-way path from the mining rig, yes, all the way down to this connector. And it actually, as you can see there, it even recorded our actions while we were flying all the way here. See here, this is our starting point, waypoint 0. We sort of lifted, or rather, we sort of moved around, turned off the thruster, turned off the connector, and then lifted up all the way to waypoint 5, and then we stopped recording there, and then moved all the way down to waypoint 6, and then from waypoint 7 we turned the recording on again, and then all the way down it recorded all the waypoints it needed to follow until we needed to turn the connector on and then turn our thruster off. So if we do that, if we play that again, see here, or rather, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Hold on. If we were to play this again and start all the way back from waypoint 0, it will do exactly as we did when we started that journey, minus the part where we flew from there to here, because as far as the controller is concerned, the waypoint started here, and then the next waypoint showed up onto the other side without any waypoints in between, so it will just fly a direct trajectory to the next waypoint. So to be able to test this out, let's just go back to our starting point, all the way back to our original state with the thrusters turned off and the connector locked in. So if we turn off the flight controller, number 4 there, and the number 2 over here, this one is the button to use the AI recorder play, so that this thing will pretty much replay everything that we did while recording. So let's turn this thing on and watch. Actually, let me just get out of the cockpit just so you know, and watch as that thing does everything that we told it to do, or rather, everything that we told it to copy. Has no active. Oh right, we need to turn this thing on. Yeah, so don't forget to keep this thing on, the AI flight mode, because this recorder needs this to get around, and this flight block needs the recorder to receive instructions. So turn the AI behavior on, and from here it just needs instructions. There we go. See? So hypothetically, this thing is just going to follow everything that we did while recording, right? Watch. So we lift it off, it's moving to the last waypoint, or rather waypoint number 5, and it's turning to face the station, and then we're already moving. See? Very, very simple setup, yeah? So it's going to do just about everything that we expect it to do at this point now. Granted, this is a beta, right? This is the beta build, so you might encounter a bit of inconsistency here and there that I've also experienced. But generally, if this thing gets polished, the bugs worked out, it pretty much works the way you expect it to, no? So, other things that I have to mention is the problem with this thing now. No matter what I set that flight control module, no matter how high I set the speed of this thing, right, the speed limit, it still manages to travel at a snail's pace anyway. Hold on, let me just get some sunlight back in here. There we go. And yeah, that's better. It manages to travel at a snail's pace anyway, and sometimes it doesn't turn the way it's supposed to, right? There's also going to be some problems if you don't set the sort of roll and pitch limiter to be leveled. It might hit a snag if it's trying to dock, you know, it might try to approach the next waypoint in a weird angle if you don't set this thing leveled. And there we go. Yeah, like I said, this thing tends to have problems. See? So anyway, let's just... Didn't want to do that. Nope, that's not what we wanted to do. Okay. So, okay, let's say that we grant that it did the thing without any problems, right? Now we are at sort of the end of this journey, which is me turning off the thrusters. Now from here, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. From here, you want this thing to do exactly the same thing except in reverse. Now, if you set up the sort of sorters and the connectors right, this thing should have emptied its cargo already. There we go. So it's already emptied its cargo, right, and it's ready to head back. From here, all you need to do at this point is to press the reverse order. So this thing technically is still running, or still trying to go to the very last waypoint, or it's still trying to maintain itself or keep itself on the very last waypoint of its journey. Now, since it's still technically playing, as you can see, the number 2, the recorder task, it's still on. At this point, you only need to set the waypoint order in reverse, and it's going to do exactly everything that it just did except backwards. And to show that, let me just go into its control panel. Oh, not this one. You can see all the waypoints here, and if I press reverse order, it's going to turn everything around like so, right? So now, look at that. Turn the thrusters on, disconnected, it's going to lift. It's going to lift off and then go back the way it did, or go back the way it came. Almost precisely. Except that it's doing it sideways, so I don't actually know how to, fix that, but whatever. I guess I I mean I don't know. See, this is my point when I said you should you should design these drones to be as omnidirectional as possible so that it can reasonably travel, well, mostly efficiently, back and forth the way it goes. See? And you can do this just about with any other vessel. Well, you can do this hypothetically with large grids too, right? And there it goes. To go down. I'm pretty sure I turned off the event controllers, right? Yeah, these things are turned off, so it's going to go land, going to connect, watch it turn green, yes, and the thrusters are turned off, and it's now ready to load up again on resources. So there's one of the possible practical applications of these two blocks working together. Yeah? This is a very exciting time for space engineers, right? There's so much possibilities now, and I definitely hope to see people build interesting stuff with these new blocks. And that's got me hyped. That's got me pretty hyped. I can basically play space engineers kind of like I play Factorio now, where everything is just automatic. I will just have, a mining station somewhere in a remote area and just have a flying drone to carry the cargo back and forth. You don't have to do it yourself anymore. You don't have to do it manually. You don't have to fiddle around with complicated timer blocks and remote control blocks as well. And these new AI blocks pretty much make everything so easy for me. As you can see here, I made one that's, for transporting fuel, right? And it's pretty much the same thing. I just recorded its own flight plan, recorded it turning on and off the stockpiling thing on the hydrogen tank, and once it fills up, it should be able to lift off. It's not for some reason. I think I'm out. Nope, I am not out. But, you get the idea, right? Oh, for some reason this thing has forgot to connect. But oh well. See this? It's connected. Now, the stuff that I used to get this thing to activate the automation, the flying part, I used the event controller for that. We'll explore that on a separate video, I think. But for now you can, think for yourself. Make up some other uses for this. Long distance mining, sort of. Maybe you can do long distance transport. You can make a taxi out of this. You can make an interstellar, you can probably set up a jump drive, right? You can set up a drone or a ship to mine in one planet and then have it fly to a completely different planet all on its own. And that's made, I won't say possible, that's made a lot easier and a lot more accessible thanks to these blocks, right? And the time it took me to set this up, it's just nothing. No more timer blocks, no nothing. You just put the blocks onto this thing, set record, and you're done, right? Other complicated stuff like event controllers, yeah, that's going to be a bit more specific to the task you want to do, but moving from one place to another, that's fairly easy, right? So before we end this video, let's just follow this little guy on his journey to deliver the hydrogen payload back to base. Oh yeah, we'll see you next time.